Hi, my name is Trayvon McNabb, and I will be doing a presentation on cerebral palsy. So, what is cerebral palsy? Well, it's a disability that sadly a lot of kids are born with, or it's a disability that affects like their learning. So, a lot of kids, develop this disability by different things. Some can be by their mothers having premature births or complications. And the thing is, when they get this disability, it causes a lack of oxygen and makes it harder for them just to process information. So, there's a lot of things that I want to discuss with you guys today. So, hopefully, after this presentation, there's going to be more information that you guys can take and help maybe students or even friends or family members, that might have kids affected with this. So these are some stats that I kind of want to show you guys, highlighting cerebral palsy. So 1 in 345 children are affected, by this disability. Not a big number, but something that we should kind of watch out for. And just like with anything, in my opinion, one is too many. And you don't want it to be that one kid that might need help, or, that one kid that, really we need to make, modifications and accommodations for. And also another stat that stuck out to me was 764,000 Americans are living with cerebral palsy. Once again, not a stat that looks big, but it's just something that we should kind of watch out for because it's a lot of people we don't know that might be affected with it, and this is a disability that a lot of people that we might know might it might affect their kids and things of that nature. Now, another stat that stuck out to me was that, as you can see, 41% can walk independently, but what that kind of means is that 49% of people, are affected with it. So I can attest to this because a student I was helping needed help, and also he needed aid because he was struggling, and he needed my help to walk when he would have seizures and stuff like that. So as you see, once again, it's a disability that we kind of have to learn more information about because you might have a lot of students that might be affected with this that you got to make accommodations for. But another stat that stuck out to me is that 1 in 4 for 1,000 live births are affected with cerebral palsy. And so what that means is that, once again, not a stat that a lot of people will find that serious, but once again, one too many, and that means that we gotta make some accommodations, and we gotta see how to help these kids that might have it. But also another stat that was very interesting is that a lot of African American kids are, suffering from this, and more, during childbirth are affected with it than many other races. So this stat was important to me because no matter what race, gender, anything, we need to help all these kids out, and we might need to help anybody that's impacted by this. So, what is cerebral palsy? Well, kind of like I alluded to in the earlier slide, cerebral palsy, as you can see, you see the history of it and the information, but it's a disability that many students might have had when they was born and stuff like that. But basically, when you're dealing with a student that might have cerebral palsy, you kind of have to see that they might process information a little slower. They might have a lack of oxygen, and also you kind of have to watch for side effects like seizures and things of that nature. And the biggest thing about cerebral palsy, a lot of the kids, they won't be able to do physical activities because it's going to be muscle tightness and things of that nature. And this is just something that I feel like people gotta have to learn more information on, simply because there's gonna be students affected with it. I know I've said that many times, but it's just something that I feel like we have to learn more information about. So there are some other stats that was important that I want you guys to see, because when being a teacher or an educator, you're gonna see stats that of students where they're affected with different things. For example, a student that I was helping out, Brian, he was atastic cerebral palsy because he had a problem with coordination, and he had a problem just walking in a straight line. Another thing that you might see with a lot of kids like this, that said kids with spastic cerebral palsy, they have muscle tightness, awkward movements. That means that it's hard for them to do physical activities, stay balanced, and things of that nature. So we need to watch all these stats simply because, once again, being an educator, being a parent, these are stats that you want to watch out for, because you want to just know the information and be prepared for everything. Now, this was research based that I found important because when working with students with cerebral palsy, I noticed this. So Brian, the kid that I was helping out, he did really good when you would give him visual schedules and graphic organizers simply because yes, he processed information a little slower, but if you gave him physical examples, he prospered. It was easier for him to get the information because if you physically showed him, he would know anything, whether it was a math problem, science, or anything like that. Same thing alluding to audio instructions and digital text. Basically, when it was physical, he could do anything because instead of like typing and stuff like that or writing on the paper, if you gave him like tablets or Chromebooks, he could easily, do the assignments like all the kids. And also like this, the multiple means of engagement. Once again, it's just anything, finding different ways to help these kids prosper because a lot of them are smart. It's just finding what makes them effective and what helps them to engage and feel more comfortable in a learning environment. So once again, these were like some stats that I want you guys to see and just some, things for, how to adjust and get through to a kid that might have cerebral palsy and, things you can look at to help them. So for a lot of teachers, there's a lot of guidelines and a lot of, websites that you could have looked at that would help. But I love these because simply I feel like it gave information on stats that could help the students out. It was stats on, some of their disabilities, what works, what doesn't work, what kind of makes them have a lot of success, and also like just some modifications that will really help these students if you have a student that might have cerebral palsy. And this was a staff for like the parents simply because kind of like I just alluded to with teachers, it was certain ways to, help them be able to do their work easier, the ways to modifications to help them get through the learning environment and just, different stats and things like that that make them successful. So now building an inclusive classroom. So the biggest thing I learned with working with Brian, that's the kid that I used to help out that has cerebral palsy. Focus on their abilities because what that means is don't worry about them processing information slow and stuff like that. Find ways that make them successful. For example, with Brian, if you gave him pictures or you gave him physical examples, he could do everything that all the other kids could do. It was just instead of like teaching the generic way, you just had to find ways and he could prosper and learn a collaborative and support teams. That means that the administrators, parents, teachers, all of them got to be on one accord because at the end of the day, it's about these students prospering. And that's what happened with Brian, where the administrators, everybody, it was all on one accord to help him prosper and graduate. And promote peer understanding. What that means is even when you have a kid with cerebral palsy in your classroom, make them feel like everybody else. Don't highlight their disability because with Brian, when he felt like he was just like everybody else, nobody talked about his disability, and he was able just to learn and engage with all the other students, he felt comfortable and he ended up prospering. So these are, just some references, but basically the reason that this topic was near and dear to me is because when I first got into the learning field, my one-on-one was Brian, the kid that I alluded to earlier, and helping him, it really just changed my whole perspective because he at first was nervous in school and stuff like that, but what I learned with him was he was such a good kid. He was really smart, and what ended up happening was when we found out what worked and what didn't work, he ended up doing great and he shocked everybody. So instead of just being that kid who needed help being in a wheelchair and needed my help to walk place to place, he ended up maturing. He ended up having good grades and he ended up, being a miracle and graduating with a degree. So that's why this topic is near and dear to me because there's a lot of kids with cerebral palsy, but a lot of them are so smart and they're so talented. It's just about finding ways to help them prosper and finding what works in the learning environment. Thank you so much, and I hope that this, really just gave you guys more information on this topic.